All right, we are back. We are back. We had some technical difficulties, but we are not defeated. Take the time to like, tag, and share. I see the numbers are going up already. But where we left off, our special guest, Dr. Linda, had given us her background, her credentials, and everything of that nature. But take the time to like, tag, and share. Pastor Bill is with us. We want to take the time before we even get Dr. Linda in. Pastor Bill, greet the people.
Good to see everybody. I'm back, like JB. I'm back. All right, I'm here. I'm here, TNT family. We got one on tonight. We ain't gonna let the devil defeat us. We are back, and we gonna help the peoples. We gonna help all the people of God, and we gonna help suffer the little children that come unto me and forbid them not. So on tonight, Elder Melvin is going to continue the conversation talking about mental health in children. Let's go.
Right. Dr. Linda, we left off with your credentials. Now we want to talk about tonight's topic, and it's dealing with identifying trauma in children. When I think of that, one of the first things I want to lead off with is dealing with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, those things that occur by the age of 18 or even before the age of 18, like physical, emotional, sexual abuse, witnessing interpersonal violence, family substance abuse, family incarceration, and things of that nature that affect children and the trajectory of their lives. Speak on that, dealing with ACEs, which it deals with trauma.
It does. So the adverse childhood experiences was an actual study that was done between the CDC and Kaiser back in 1995. And what they did was screened about 17,000 individuals who had insurance, but also had some pretty chronic health conditions to see if they had some adverse experiences in their childhood that were in common. What they found was that there were about 10 experiences that you just mentioned, and that by experiencing those before the age of 18, there was a higher risk of long-term mental, physical, and social negative outcomes based on the number of experiences that happened. That study has been replicated many times, and there's been additional types of trauma that have been added on to that, right? So discrimination, poverty, homelessness, community violence, and watching or experiencing community violence. All of those things have been tied now through trauma, right? And through a lot of research to poor behavioral health outcomes. So mental health outcomes, substance use disorder, violence within families and communities, but also some severe health issues. So COPD, lung cancer, obesity, autoimmune diseases, all of the things that people of color have a tendency to experience more often. The most interesting thing to me about the adverse childhood experience study, though, is that it only looked at people up to the age of 18. But most research now indicates that our brains don't fully develop until 25 to 30, right? And so if we continue to experience trauma from 18 to 30, it still impacts our longer term kind of health outcomes that we see in individuals. And as always, right, like there's also this intersectionality of intergenerational trauma. So individuals who are Black, Indigenous, people of color that have experienced slavery, pandemics, genocides, right, forced relocation, systemic prejudice, things of that nature, the intersectionality of those experiences with actual individual experiences of trauma actually compounds, right? It makes it more complex and more difficult to heal. There's a reason why, Indigenous peoples and Black people have higher levels of substance use, higher levels of depression, higher levels of anger and rage, higher levels of.
Right.
Right. It's that intersectionality of the trauma that's experienced as a collective people and as individual people.
That's amazing. And you say something, you kept using the word trauma. I was at a conference a year or so ago, and a man said something that was very profound. He stated while he was presenting, he said, "You have said often that marijuana is a gateway drug." He said, but if we really think about it, trauma
Is the gateway.
Is the gateway.
Is the gateway. When he said that, it spoke volumes, because no one wakes, and not to veer off, no one wakes up and says, I just simply want to be addicted. Something, when you backtrack, even when it deals with children, that trauma that has occurred, that even if it has been dealt with, has changed that trajectory, that the death of that parent at such a young age and things of that nature.
I think what's really also interesting, right, is that we don't understand how it impacts generationally. So children of parents that have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences are something like 44 times more likely to experience interpersonal violence.
Wow. Speak on it.
Wow.
And that's what speak on it, Dr. Linda.
Wow.
Because what winds up happening is when we experience trauma, especially when traumas happen from a place of repeatedly, right? What happens in our body is we go into our fight, flight, or freeze. What does that mean? It means adrenaline's rushing, cortisol's released. It means, right, we have all these physical reactions to protect ourselves because we want to survive. Well, if that is constantly happening, right, it can change the way that we then exhibit certain genetic codes. It can unlock a genetic code in us, and that can then be passed down from generation to generation. So what we have frequently called generational curses, is epigenetics being passed down from generation to generation based on the traumas that we've experienced.
Right. Someone said, it's been asked. Can you define trauma? Dr. Linda, I'm gonna leave the floor.
Trauma, by definition, is an event or series of events that is experienced or witnessed and has profound life-changing impacts or effects. So what may be traumatic to one person is going to be different than what's traumatic to someone else, based on what coping skills they have, what resilience factors they have, what protective factors they may have, and how in which, right, those protective factors and skills are then utilized. I like to explain it when I'm talking to the youth that I work with, that ultimately trauma is the experience of something overwhelming to us. We have a natural stress response that's built into our bodies. And if an experience overwhelms that stress system and we can no longer handle it, it will impact us physically, it will impact us psychologically, it will impact us spiritually.
Right.
It will impact us in ways that we don't even recognize.
And that, Dr. Linda, you bring up, when you talk about you leading into somewhat of the physiology of it, because when you deal with that trauma, you're also dealing with the amygdala, which controls the fight, flight, or freeze. Right, fight, flight, or freeze. And when you are in that chronic trauma, not dealing with just simply acute, but chronic trauma, it primes that brain to be constantly in fight, or in that imbalance.
Right. Well, I think it's important to say 2 things. Number one, everybody either fights, flights, or freezes, right? Everybody has all 3. Our body naturally decides which one it needs to use in order to protect ourselves in any given situation. The way that our brains work is, with any information that comes in, any experience that we have, the first question it asks is, are we safe? And if we do not feel safe, we immediately go into that fight, flight, or freeze. If we do not feel safe, we immediately go to protect ourselves for survival.
Right.
And if trauma happens so often that that's where we basically live, I think what's most important to recognize is that whatever is utilized, right, is what becomes normal. So our brains, our systems, our bodies, that becomes our baseline.
So Lynn, what would cause someone to be in a traumatic situation, even as a child or as in an interpersonal relationship, but experience that and then still choose to stay?
Because they don't know. Right? So, and I say that because if trauma is your normal, you being in a traumatic relationship with someone else, it's just your normal. You just think that that's what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Right? Unfortunately, we've grown up in situations where we just think that that's normal. We think it's normal to be in trauma. We think it's normal to be on edge of whether or not we're going to get hit or not, or if someone's going to be intoxicated or not, or right, or if we're going to walk down the street like you and I, right, and may happen to be involved in a drive-by. Like those were just kind of normal things. It wasn't until I left Los Angeles that I realized that, hey,
that's not normal.
Gangs aren't everywhere, and you probably shouldn't have had to be driving down the street and duck because people were shooting over your head.
Right.
Oh, okay. Right. Like I didn't realize that because I thought that's just what it was.
My transition, and to your point, my transition to Georgia, it took me 2 years to learn how to actually sleep because I didn't hear a helicopter over my head at night because I grown so accustomed to having that be a part of,
it was your white
how
noise
you fell asleep. It was my white noise.
Hey, and it goes back to those we talking about identifying childhood trauma. It goes, and even though that helicopter may have not been trauma, those things that you grow up with.
It was attached to traumatic things.
Right.
It was attached to gang violence.
Right.
Trigger.
It was a trigger to say somebody is doing something again, and it's happening near me.
Right. Gotcha. Deacon,
So,
Deacon
Dr. Linda,
Francis, go ahead. I see you chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I kind of got stuck at the generational part of it. So I guess my question is there a certain age where these types of traumas manifest more than others?
No.
I mean,
there's none of that, right? Each person is different. Each person's experience is different. And I think one of the things that is really important to recognize is that sometimes we see it when people are babies and they start, right? You have children who have been traumatized, infants, and they're crying all the time and they don't feel safe with any adult person, right? Like those are signs and symptoms of experiencing trauma. And sometimes it's not until there's a re-triggering later, right?
Gotcha.
That you'll see it. One of the things I always say when I'm teaching about this is behavior is communication of unmet needs. So if we are seeing behavior that looks like hypervigilance, always sick, reenactment, you see anger or rage, you see if you start to see negative behaviors, the fact is that what's being communicated is currently there is an unmet need. I either don't feel safe, I don't feel loved or I don't feel respected. Those are generally the three. And all three of them can be traumatizing to us as human beings. And so I think that's the part that we don't necessarily think about or recognize, right? What I see there's a question about how can we recognize when someone, right, has been traumatized. The fact is that if you know what their baseline is and you see a sharp change in their behavior, there's an unmet need there. It is likely that something has happened to create that change. And it's not just oftentimes, oh, well, they hit puberty, right? And so now they're acting out. There are some levels of that. I'm not going to lie. I have 3 teenagers. I have seen it all. And I was a teenager. And I remember very clearly, right? There's some experience of just developmentally, now I'm pushing boundaries. But if you see true, I always like to think of it as extremes, right? We can say that it's likely that they've had a traumatic situation, because trauma has a tendency to change how we view ourselves, right? Trauma will make us feel like we're not worthy of love, we're unseen, we're unheard, we're unworthy of connection, right? Trauma will change how we view the world. It's not a safe place. Nobody cares about me. It doesn't matter if I live or die. I'm gonna, it's just gonna be what it is. But it also can change the way in which we view our spiritual life, right? Traumatic events can push us all the way towards God or all the way away from. There's a lot of people I've seen, right, that are like, if there was a God, they would have never let this happen to me. And that's not true, right? Sometimes we go through experiences so that we can actually have a testimony, right? He turns that test into a testimony so that we can actually help someone else. And so I think we see that a lot. And it's actually interesting to watch.
So in terms of recognizing that there's a change, and what should a parent do if they don't know what to do?
Well, so the first thing is, from a very early age, you've got to establish a relationship with your kids. I think one of the things in this day and age with cell phones and all the other things, the two things that I'm seeing is, one, a complete and utter disconnection because everybody's on their cell phones. Nobody's talking to each other. So they don't even have a relationship so that they can tell when something's different. But the other thing that I'm seeing is our generation of parenting still saying to this new generation, do as I say, not as I do. You have to do what I tell you to do, and not realizing that we're doing that from our place of trauma. Because we've experienced trauma, we are feeling unsafe. We want to try to protect them, but we're trying to protect them from things that they're not even experiencing. Right. And so it's really interesting to if you sit back and think about, right, how we actually parent versus how our parents parented. We all said, I guarantee everybody was like, I'm not going to do what my parents did. I'm going to do something totally different. And how many of us have literally opened our mouths and heard our parents coming out?
Right.
But we're doing that because we're parenting from a place of pain and unhealed trauma instead of from a place of healing and trying to engage in authentic relationship with our kids. The first thing you've got to do is actually allow them to communicate in ways that are authentic to them and create safe space. I am not saying create safe space for them to cuss you out, because be clear, all of mine know better.
Right.
But they also know that if they need to get that out, if they need to have that conversation, we have a safe word that says, I need like 10 minutes to just get this off. And then we can talk through it and help them process. We've got to learn how to communicate different so that they can learn how to communicate different, because the positive experiences that we have and the way in which we teach resilience, right, can actually overturn some of those adverse childhood experiences that we've passed down from generation to generation. We can fix it. We just got to do the work to heal. And we've got to then parent and teach from that place.
Now, I fell off for a few seconds with my having some technical difficulties. If we've already addressed this, let me know. How do we actually identify trauma in our children?
Yeah, we talked about that.
We talked about it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, because I had fallen off of the thing. So once we've identified, how do we deal with it once it's identified? It's one thing to have knowledge, what as a parent, as a teacher, because we're not only speaking from parents. I'm in education myself. We see things. Deacon Brackens is in a different area. Jeremy, what is the next step after we feel that we've identified some childhood trauma? Because many times the parents are too close to the situation to be recognized anything.
Well, so there's a couple of things that I always recommend. The first is, don't run away from therapy, right? Like, actually, look, if you have medical insurance, you have behavioral health insurance. So call your insurance company, find out who's available, and set an appointment and allow them to have a safe space to communicate.
Gotcha.
If you can't create that, give them that safe space where they can communicate authentically and genuinely without you present. I think that's the first part.
Okay.
I think the second thing is really, like I said, of course, relationship with our kids is important as well. But the third thing is, if we want to fix our kids, we got to fix ourselves. And we got to realize that trauma is not something that you can just pray away.
Uh-oh.
I have heard this so many times. Oh, well, I'll just pray about it. Well, praying about it is not going to heal the sexual abuse that you had in your childhood. Praying about it, right? It will help you get strength and comfort to deal with it. Right. He will be there with you, but you're going to need to go to therapy, or you're going to need to find some way to heal it. I think one of the things that we also have to recognize is that therapy is not for everybody. Right. Right. Especially people of color, we are a communal culture, not an individualistic culture. And therapy tends to be very individualistic. And so one of the things that I think is important is for us to recognize how there may be other things that are culturally sensitive and culturally respectful for us as individuals and families that we can do. Right. Gotcha. Yes. And so I do think therapy is important. Hi, I'm a therapist, but I also realize and recognize that therapy is not for everybody, right. But you got to figure out some way to deal with it.
How do we address the stigma of therapy? If you, especially in terms of if you're dealing with childhood trauma and right. You have one parent that's resistant to therapy as a familial unit?
Well, so I'm not going to get into the legalities of parents, right? Because if parents are married, you only need one person to sign off.
Read in between the lines.
Right? If they are unmarried, whoever has legal custody has to sign off. And it's supposed to be made aware. That does not always happen, but that's what's supposed to happen. Right? But the other part of it is that sometimes one parent can go with a child and show their support of them. And because the relationship between them and that child gets so much better, the other parent all of a sudden will want to be a part of it as well. Right. So sometimes we have to take the first step and say, okay, if you don't want to be a part, that's fine. But I still want to get help for our kid. So I'm going to go with him and I'm going to be there to support him. And if and when you're ready, feel free to join us.
There's a question here. It says, how do we unfreeze what we froze?
Positive experiences.
Positive experiences. Okay.
Healing and positive experiences, right? So if trauma makes us feel like the world's unsafe, no one cares about us, we're unloved, right? One of the things we need to do is have positive experiences in those ways. So we need to feel seen, we need to feel heard, we need to feel connected with, which is why therapy oftentimes works. But one of the things that we don't recognize that actually helps heal, right, or unfreeze the frozen is healthy relationships.
Gotcha.
Right? So healthy relationships are one of the key resilience factors, key protective factors to addressing trauma.
Yes, it is. And you brought up something. I dealt with it when introducing ACEs. But there's a word that you and I both use that is imperative that we take time to talk about it, even if it's only for a few moments. It's not only trauma from the aspect of receiving it, it's also witnessing the trauma.
100%.
You use the word witness. I even said, when I said witnessing interpersonal violence, expound on that. Because the first thing people think trauma is only when it's hitting you or this happened. But speak to the witnessing of things that has traumatic effects.
Social media has increased the level of trauma, depression, and anxiety in our society. Why is that? Because anytime a community violence a school violence, right? Any type of violence is recorded and posted online. It is shared, and people are seeing it over and over and over and over
Right.
and over and over again. Witnessing those things can be very traumatic. I'll give an example for me, right?
Talk about it.
George Floyd, after the first time I watched that video, I could not watch it anymore because it was a re-traumatization of other things that I've seen growing up in my life, other stories I've seen, other movies I've seen, other experiences I've had, right? Like it brought up all of it. And what winds up happening is when we experience or when we witness things, right? When we witness other people being hurt, when we witness people that look like us experiencing systematic racism or being put into cages or any of those things,
Right.
it can like literally automatically puts us in a place of being unsafe.
And I'm glad that you expounded on that, because trauma is not simply when you receive the beating or you've been in this environment, it's also witnessing it. You spoke to it. Racism in and of itself, traumatic. One of the things that we deal with when it comes to ACEs is poverty. Well, I was not born on the right side of the tracks. The family did not have tons of finances. So a lot of these ACEs we're born into. So it definitely speaks to that.
I'm just diving in here to say, I just thought about this is what y'all were just saying. I've recently witnessed a trauma, or witnessed something rather that traumatized me, right? To my kid, well, to Eden, it was fascinating. But she woke up one morning, she's ready to school. She was like, Dad, it was a fire across the street this morning. It's like, what? She's like, yeah. So I go and look out the window. I mean, no, it's 3 fire trucks out there. The whole street is blocked off. It's like, well, you're not going to school today. So across the street and 2 houses down, I mean, now it's something that I'll say intentionally. I've addressed it by facing it directly. Mm-hmm. And actually going to the house, walking around, taking my own little look around to see. But now it's kind of like, man, I mean, this was that close to me. And every day I'm reminded these people, thankfully nobody was injured, but this is a total loss. This is a total loss of their house. They won't be back in that house anytime soon. So I'm saying I have just recently witnessed and processing that as well.
And I think what's going to be interesting for you, Pastor Bill, is our brains actually, in the moment of a trauma, remember the smell, the sight, the touch, the thoughts, the emotions, right? All of our senses are fully engaged so that our brain codes, okay, this is when I wasn't safe. So if you smell that same smell again, if you see it, if you touch it, if you taste it, if you feel it, if you think it, your body is going to immediately go back into your fight, flight, or freeze response.
But Dr. Linda, now you're bringing up another thing. Trauma becoming triggers. Becoming triggers.
And what's interesting is, but what's interesting is that people don't realize that they're triggers for them. Right? Okay, because what happens is it's stored down here in the am I safe space in our brain. It's in our brainstem. It's not something that we can cognitively process. It's not in our cortex. It's back here. So we're triggered into our fight, flight, or freeze, right? But we don't even know why. So oftentimes what we'll see is behavior, right? We'll be like, well, what happened? Why did you respond like that? All I said was hi, right? Like, and people are like, I don't know, but it's because something happened that triggered them. I had a client who was abused by her mom. Her mom wore a very specific Bath and Body Works spray. And we had done a lot of work. She was actually healing. But she went into this class where the teacher was wearing the same body spray. And we didn't realize that that's what it was. But at the time, what kept happening is anytime the teacher came near her, she went into fight. She went into flipping tables, throwing chairs, cussing her out, trying to push her away. And we didn't realize until I had a meeting with the teacher and was like, wow, you smell just like her mom.
But Dr. Linda, this presents a problem.
Huge.
Not being knowledgeable of our triggers,
Mm-hmm.
and also untreated trauma.
Yes.
Two things. We're dealing with identifying childhood trauma, but let's say we've identified it, untreated trauma, and not having knowledge of triggers, because that knowledge of triggers does not remove or alleviate some of the things, but it definitely reduces.
Agreed.
Speak to that, the untreated, the lack of knowledge of triggers and untreated trauma.
Well, I mean, like I said, right? It's oftentimes hard to know that that things that you've experienced are going to be triggers until you're re-triggered, right?
Right.
But it takes, I think it takes intentionality, right? It takes intentionality to really think back to, okay, well, this was the behavior, but what happened right before that? What was the antecedent? What really kicked that off? And really pay attention to what that looks like and why.
Right.
You would be shocked and amazed at how just doing that slight exercise, that small exercise, right? Of, well, why did I get so mad? Why did I react in that way? Did I smell something? Did I touch something? Did I taste something? Did I think something, right? Did I feel something? Like, what was it? And if you start to think back and look at every time you've behaved in a certain way, oftentimes it comes back to the same kind of things.
Right. Very powerful. And when we deal with this, and I don't want to go too far psychologically, but we've dealt with this on Bible application with APC of Morgan Park. But I'm gonna say this: we as people, even in our adulthood, the children may not know this, but we need to do our due diligence with our shadow work. Dealing with Carl Jung's theory of the shadow, how we repress things and don't deal with things, but yet we'll put on the persona being the mask, and how we'll go into society, feed the mask, but yet not deal with repressed thought. We actually, even when we deal with a therapist, we ourselves have to deal with shadow work. In other words, and don't want to be too graphic, that individual has to deal with that person that was molested. You got to deal with that. You got to deal with the trauma of your father dying when you were 11 years of age and he was only 48 years of age. You got to sit down and deal with that. So we got to put in some shadow work as well, working on ourselves.
100%. And I think that's part of what I was saying earlier. That might have been why you weren't on, right? One of the things that I said was, especially for parents of children, right? If we want to heal our children, we have to first heal ourselves. We have to take the time to really look at what are our traumas, are they unhealed, and really do the work. Because if we don't, we're just perpetuating trauma. Because what's going to happen is we're going to then traumatize our children.
Right, exactly. Pastor Bill, take it on over, Pastor Bill.
So I would just dive in to kind of ask this question in this line. How can we, or particularly dealing with children, how can parents or those working with children, how can they differentiate between, what is bad behavior and what is actually an issue that's presenting? Can you kind of deal with that a little bit more, color around that a little bit more? When we were coming up as, children in our day before diagnosis, it was just, oh, that boy's got an attitude, or that girl's got a temper, or she's got a mouth on her, but that actually could, or those us musicians, we're banging and tapping on everything and they can't focus. Something's wrong with them. They can't get the lesson. And so can you kind of just deal with that a little bit, how to recognize the difference between what is, and could be maybe a disorder versus just some behavioral correction?
Well, so number one, trauma is actually correlated to a lot of disorders. And that's the part that I think people don't realize, is that trauma is, as was said earlier, can be a gateway to many of the things that we see in terms of symptoms, signs of disorders. Excuse me. So it is somewhat difficult for a parent who's not psychologically trained to really kind of look at that, right? And so the first thing you can do is take them to their pediatrician. Take them to their doctor, because their doctor can tell you what's developmentally appropriate, what's not, what you're seeing, what you're not. And if they start to hear certain symptoms, if they feel like it's necessary, they can also refer you to a therapist. But the other part of it is, yes, when we were growing up, you know, people just had attitudes. But to be perfectly honest, right, what I can tell you, at least from my experience, is my behavior, my mouth, my attitude, me always wanting to fight. Jeremy, be quiet. Right? My nickname was the Gooch in high school. Because
wow.
Yeah, like it was bad. But what I can tell you is that was based in trauma.
Oh, wow. Testify.
Right? Like I had several early childhood experiences. Someone was shot in front of me. I was in a drive-by. My virginity was taken at gunpoint, right? Like I've had several things that I was acting out, but what I was doing was communicating the unmet need of feeling safe. And so sometimes instead of just thinking, oh, well, it's just a teenager that has an attitude problem, we need to be having conversations with them about what's really happening, right? And not asking the question, what's wrong with you? Right. But asking the question, what happened to you?
What happened to you? That's good. That's good.
Right? Because the more we can figure out what happened to them, then, like if my mom would have asked, instead of saying, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? My response was, ain't nothing wrong with me, right? Because for me, there was nothing wrong. I was responding according to how I was feeling. I was very aligned in my behavior and in my feelings. Right. But if she would have asked me what happened to me, I would have been able to explain some of the things that had happened. So that would be a key for most parents, is to ask the question.
That statement right there. Safety is so underestimated.
So underestimated.
And I'm sorry, that is profound right there.
Agreed.
That goes back into those risk and protective factors.
But especially for teenagers. I think, right, they get in that place where their peers are more important. They're going through adolescence, they hit puberty, and we just automatically are like, oh, well, they're teenagers, they're going to lose their minds, right? Well, they don't have to. You can actually talk to your kids. It's something that's actually very doable. I actually talk to my kids all the time, to the point where at least twice a year, I sit down with each of them and ask them, what is it that I need to do better? What is it that I need to keep doing as your parent? Where can I improve? And what are some things you want me to just stop doing altogether? Because I want to learn from each of them how to communicate with each of them, because each one of them has different personalities, has different strengths, has different ways of communicating, right? They're all very different. And so as a parent, I have to not be in a place of, y'all are going to do what I say and how I say it, and really get to a place of learning how to communicate with them in their language, in their appreciation language, in their love language, so that when something does happen, they feel safe enough to talk to me and say, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. Please don't go beat up anybody.
I absolutely need to hear that, because I was raised.
Listen,
the ultimate authority.
This is my house. You're going to do what I say.
That's right.
Or else. Now, let me be clear. It is still very important to set boundaries and rules for children. Yeah. I am not saying that. What I'm saying is that we have to learn how to communicate with them and not be in a, but in a, let me explain to you why I'm saying this. Let me give you the why. Because oftentimes we tell them what to do and how to do it, but we don't give them the why. And that's where the resistance comes from.
I'm getting a lot of that by virtue of, and I've mentioned it here, but to remain sane and mentally healthy.
Listen,
I grew up as the youngest of 4 boys, and now I'm the father of 2 daughters. So the frame of reference, for discipline for me is as totally thrown out the window. And I have to have great people like you in this village to be able to say, work on the communication with your, preteen daughter. So I appreciate that so much.
And that's
we
go ahead. I'm
lose.
sorry, Dr. Linda. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, yeah, we lose track of realizing or remembering that when we were younger, we just wanted somebody to listen to us.
Yeah.
When our parents were yelling at us or disciplining us or whatever, we were just trying to be heard, right? We were like, but, and every time we said but, we got our butts beat. At least I did. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Right? You're not about to be talking back to me. But what we wanted was to be heard. What we wanted was to be seen. What we wanted was to be connected. What we wanted was to feel like we belonged. And what we wanted was to feel like we were loved.
Mm.
And so we've got to really work hard at not perpetuating the trauma and creating that safe space so that people can feel seen, heard, loved, connected with, right? And able to communicate authentically and not have to put on those masks that you were talking about.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We already
Dr.
got
Linda,
to do it in society. We don't need to be doing it at home too.
Black, Deacon Brackett, you were saying something.
Yeah.
Deacon
I do have a question for you. So I kind of cringe at the fact I've known for the longest time that I wanted to be a father. And I remember when I first started therapy, I was telling my middle son, hey, I won't be able to come and get you or something of that sort because dad has therapy today. And I was excited about it, but he began to cry. He was extremely fearful of what that was. And I don't know that I had the right words, the right language to use to take away that fear. So my question to you, and you may have kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, what's the best way of introducing your children to accepting therapy and it being a safe space for them?
I always say we're going to the doctor.
Just call it the doctor.
We're going to the psychology doctor, or we're going to right? Like, I think the word therapy in and of itself in our community has such a negative connotation that if we say we're going to go talk to somebody, right? Or we're going to go talk to a doctor that can help us kind of talk through things, right? If you think about it, psychologists, therapists, right? It's just another specialty from our primary care doc, right? I've explained to lots of kids, right? Last time I checked, your brain was a part of your body. It was inside. It was not external. And so just like we go to the doctor for our heart and our lungs and our legs and our arms, sometimes we need to go to doctors for our brains as well.
That's good. That's good. Okay.
That's very good. Dr. Bill, close us out as we come to the finish line.
Well, thank you. No, Mel, thank you for that, because that was amazing what she just said right there. That was so amazing for us to be able to put that in a caption to just let everybody know. The question that keeps coming up, what's one thing we can do to break the stigma? The one thing we can do to break the stigma is to make it very clear that your brain is a part of your body. And just like your body needs medical assistance, your brain needs medical and professional assistance. And so there are therapists, there's psychology and psychiatry there to help you. And there's Wholly Healthy, ministry that is intentional about ministering to the human condition. That's body, soul, and spirit. So on tonight, let's pivot to a close here. What Dr. Lynn, first of all, thank you for sharing with us your time, your talent, and your treasure. Everybody that's watching, y'all type in the comments. Thank you, Dr. Lynn, Lin. Type in the comments. Thank you, Dr. Lynn. Let's
thank you, Dr.
run
Lynn.
some appreciation out for this amazing Black woman.
Yes.
Therapist.
Very knowledgeable.
Educated,
Amazing.
Anointed, appointed
Amazing.
for such a time as this.
Bring her back.
Here's why I want to close with this, because you've got such a depth of knowledge and experience is what I love. Can you just give us maybe what is your suggestion of what age? Is there a number where you think children should start the therapeutic process or should start seeing, a therapist or a psychologist? Is there a certain number? What is your thought on that? And then what was your age and number? And if you could conclude with just letting us know as a therapist, do you have a therapist? Do you still continue in therapy? I know you said you have gone through therapy. So can you kind of talk about that? What age should you start? What has been your process in engaging, kind of how you had to work through, and do you continue now?
So my thought is that in terms of age, it really honestly depends on the behaviors and the signs and symptoms that you're seeing, right? There are therapists that can do therapy as early as age 5 and 6, right? Because there's play therapy models and narrative therapy models, music therapy models that can be really helpful for younger age children. So I don't know that there's necessarily a certain age, but to be perfectly honest, it's oftentimes in middle school or the latter part of elementary school that we start to see some signs and symptoms if childhood experiences have already taken place. As for me, I definitely have been in therapy since I was about 16, off and on. What I will tell you is not only do I have a therapist, but I also have therapist friends that we provide support to each other. We literally, one therapist friend and my once a quarter, we get together and we just have a peer support group with us and a couple of other therapists so that we have the ability to kind of debrief and, deal with the vicarious trauma that happens when you're providing therapy to people. But I have been in therapy. My husband's in therapy. My children have been in therapy off and on, right? Like I really, truly view therapy similar to your PCP. If you feel like you're sick, you go to your doctor. Well, if you feel like you're mentally unwell, if you feel like you're starting to experience depression or anxiety, or, you're being triggered regularly, that's signs that you're not feeling well. Call the doctor, set up an appointment. It really isn't. I will say this, it's important to find a therapist that you trust and that you feel like you can engage with. Not all therapists are designed for everybody. I think that is huge to know. So you may have to, just like with your doctor, right? Like you may have to shop around and find who works best for you. But I do think it's important for us all to have at least a therapist that we can connect with if and when we feel like we may be getting sick.
Well, Dr. Lynn, I appreciate you so much for giving us this sound advice, giving us this wonderful and amazing encouragement. Fellas, if y'all want to give your last salutations, then I won't keep you any longer, but I will dismiss you all and I'll speak to the APC family. But Elder Sanders, man, thank you for being a facilitator with Holy Healthy. Let's continue, as you all are watching, let's continue to pray for Dr. Buckles, had a medical emergency over the weekend. Let's continue to pray for Evangelist Paulette, that God will continue to strengthen her body. Let's continue to pray for Elder Owens, that God would continue to bless his business and his family and his affairs. And these are those who help us to lead this ministry, Holy Healthy. And then now we got the brain trust. As you said, Dr. Lynn, this is my circle. This is my unit. This is, I get to ping pong off the stoic. I get to ping pong off the intellectual over here, but he's this way. And then Jeremy, he's going to
be Jeremy.
He's going to give it to you raw and uncut. So I'm grateful to you all. I appreciate each and every one of you all individually. So thank you again. Stay tuned, you all. Next week, we got another amazing Black woman who will be with us on next week. She's a friend of the family. She is family. My sister, Tara Keisha, will be with us on next week. And we're going to be talking more about how to find resources, how to locate access for mental health professionals, as well as next steps of engagement. So make sure you all are here next week. I mean, come on, this have y'all been enjoying TNT this month? If y'all been enjoying TNT this month, just type in the comments right on. Just, I don't know, that's just what came to mind, but just type in the comments right on. Type in the comments right on. If you've been enjoying TNT, And if TNT has been a blessing this month, this mental health awareness month, y'all come on, let me see where y'all at. My Tuesday night church. That's right. Come on, Auntie Donna. I see y'all in there. I see y'all. Y'all come on in here and let me know you've been enjoying this month. That's right. Great sessions all month, even on Sunday. The Bible application sessions have been amazing. Sister Paulette is going to be teaching this Sunday herself. She's going to be teaching on dealing with grief, moving from pain to power to purpose. She's going to be talking about how grief helps us to transition pain, power, and purpose. So make sure you join us this coming Sunday on Bible application 955-7498-5342. You see it right there at the bottom of your screen every Sunday. When we were growing up in church, it was called Sunday school. But since the pandemic, we now call it Bible application. The PC church has now moved online to the virtual space. I'm getting ready to close. I got a couple of announcements, but since it's Tuesday night, it's TNT Tuesday Night Talks, Tuesday Night Teaching, where we talk about the Bible and we extract biblical principles and spiritual truths to help us to continue to be productive citizens in the kingdom and in society. I got to give y'all some Bible before we get out of here. The book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 50. Type that in the chat. Type that in the comments. Genesis chapter 50. Verse number 20. I see you, Sister Wynn. Right on. I see you, Sister Regina. Right on. Y'all, come on. You don't even have to go there. You don't have to scroll there. Just type in the comments, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. And then we're going to get out of here. I'm going to give you a few announcements and we're going to close. But this Mental Health Awareness Month, and particularly this topic that we were talking about on tonight, dealing with mental health and children, the Holy Ghost of God impressed upon me to take a look into the scripture, and this scripture popped in my mind. It says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Watch this. To bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Let me read that again. I want to read that again. I want y'all to catch this, and we're gonna have a quick church service and get happy and get out of here. As for you, you meant evil against me, but Bishop E preached it. Thank God for the but. I ain't gonna preach that tonight, but maybe I'll preach that next time. But God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Type in the comments, my test is my testimony. Type it in the comments. My test is my testimony. Type it in the comments. My test is my testimony. You just heard from this young lady who shared with us in a snapshot some of the traumatic experiences that she had. And because of those experiences, they've driven her to a place where she has found healing, she's found wholeness, and she's found happiness by using all of the resources that God has made available to her. And now God is working through her. And I want you to know that just like God did it for her, God has done it and will continue to do it for you, and you here, there, and everywhere. Y'all need to catch this quick and don't miss it. It's what we were talking about on tonight. God being able to take your traumatic experiences, God being able to take your triggers and turn them into triumphs. Come on. I feel that's what we say. I feel my help now. When God allows you to see that what you have overcome, what once tested you, what once traumatized you, and what once triggered you has now become the testimony of your triumph. You have made it from pain. You have learned your purpose, and now you walk in the power of the Holy Ghost. It's in the text, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God. Somebody type in the comments right now. I told y'all I'm gonna have to get hoop triggers out in a second. Type in the comments, but God, but God, but God, but God. You did not volunteer for those negative experiences. You did not volunteer for those traumatic and tragic experiences. You did not volunteer for things that you were associated with. You did not volunteer for things you were persuaded to participate in. You did not volunteer for some of the negative experiences that God has allowed you. Watch this, not caused you, but that God has allowed you to experience. Now, if you've been in church long enough, then you've heard this scripture preached, so I shouldn't have to go all the way back through it. That's what we got Bible application for. But Joseph makes this statement when he's looking at the same people that threw him in a pit. Come on, somebody. He's talking to his brothers, and he's sitting there after he's been healed, after he's been processed, after he's been made whole, and after he has reached his place and his position of destiny. And he's able to look at the very people that tried to set him up, that tried to do him in, that left him for dead, his own blood brothers, all because of the destiny that God had already ascribed to his life. There are some things that you had to go through. No, you did not volunteer for it. And I'm here to tell you, as the pastor of APC Morgan Park, as the priest of the house, as the one who speaks on behalf of God to God's people, and the one who speaks to God on behalf of the people, God would say to you, my apologies for what you had to experience, but I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry for what you had to go through. I apologize that it was painful. I apologize that you had to experience such debauchery. I apologize that you had to experience such calamity. But Jesus, come here, somebody, was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he said, I know what I've got to go through. If it be your will, let this cup pass. But nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. When you accept that God's will is for your life, God's will is on your life, and God's will has been approved in your life, then you will be able to look back at all of the bad things that you've been through. You'll be able to look back at all of the negative things that you've been through. Come on, somebody. I told you, I feel like having church now. You'll be able to look back at all of the debauchery, all of the disrespect, all of the degradation, and you'll be able to say, I know where I was, but look at where I am now. Hitherto hath the Lord brought me. Come here, Mama Lou. When I look back over my life and I think things over, I can truly say that I've been blessed and I've got a testimony. Come on, somebody, testify in the comments right now and just say, I've got a testimony. There are some things in your life that you don't mind testifying about. And then there are some other things in your life that you don't even want to talk about. And I don't even want to talk about, you ought to thank God for the things that God has buried. You ought to thank God for the things that, as we say proverbially, have been thrown into the sea of forgetfulness. And you ought to thank God that you are here today, clothed in as much of your right mind as you still have. You ought to thank God that you are here tonight, able to watch TNT and still able to high five me, even from where you are in the comment section, and type and tell your neighbor that the only reason I ain't lost my mind is because I kept my mind stayed on Jesus. All right, I thought I had a church. Type it in the chat and say, my mind is stayed on Jesus. My mind is stayed. Type it in there, stayed, S-T-A-Y-E-D. That's how you high five your neighbor now. You do it in the comment section. Type in the comments and tell your neighbor, come on, tell them. It is because I kept my mind stayed on Jesus. The book tells us, I will keep him in perfect peace. You know good and well you should be somewhere between hell and jail right now. But if it had not been, let me say that again, that was too good. You know good and well you should be somewhere between hell and jail. But you ought to thank God that the peace of God that passes all understanding has guided and guarded your mind. And that's why you're able to say, like Joseph, with all of the trauma, the tragedies that he experienced, even from a young boy. Y'all know the story. He had to go from the pit to the palace to the prison before he could finally be exalted to the place where God had him. But after he got to his destiny, and I'm telling you, those 26 people that are watching that didn't log off, the rest of them should have stayed on. I'm telling you, the word of the Lord for you tonight and to catch and to hold on to is that everything that happened, it was for your good. It may not have been good to you, but my God, it's good for you. Because where you are right now today, and even if you aren't there today naturally, I want you to, by faith, declare it today so that it will manifest in your life sooner than later. And say to your enemies, say to your antagonistic situations, come on, speak to it and say, what the enemy meant for evil, God meant it for my good. I'm closing, and we know that how many things? I can't hear y'all. I see you, Sister Shawana. I'm so glad you were here tonight because this session was for you and your business so that you can continue to help those children to thrive and flourish as you continue to nurture and care for them. You too, Meemaw. Accept and receive the instruction that was given here on tonight. And you all do more than just babysit children. I'm speaking to you now in your business that the favor of God would shine down on you. And so that the children that are in your care are not just being cared for, but they're being nurtured and they're being empowered and they are being groomed in safe spaces. All things, I hear y'all. Come on, APC. All things are working together for the good of them who love the Lord and are called according to God's purpose. I'm Bill Ellis. I love everybody. I got to get ready to get out of here, but I just want to remind you one more time, as for you, you meant it for evil. I don't know who you need to call or who you need to text, but it's all right. You can call them or you can text them, send them an email. It's all right. Some of you may just need to shout it into the universe. Just shout it into the atmosphere and just tell every adversary that's out there trying to fight against you. As for you, what you meant for evil, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good to bring it about that many people would be kept alive. APC family, we'll be in church on Sunday. Amen. Let's sow on tonight. There are 5 ways for you to give. There are 5 ways for you to give. We want to be a blessing to the wonderful doctor that was with us on tonight. We want to be a blessing to the APC. We've got our 100-year anniversary. We are 100 years and beyond. We're on our way, saints. We're on our way. We are on our way. September 2023. Save the date. Save the date. 100 years and beyond. So that $23 gift on tonight, every Tuesday, every TNT this year. This is 1923, our 100th year anniversary. We're believing God for all of you. You can scan that QR code that's on your screen. Sow that $23 offering on tonight. Sow that $23 seed on tonight. Sow that $23 seed on tonight. And trust God. You can't beat God given no matter how you try. Anytime you sow into the kingdom, anytime you sow into APC Morgan Park, you are sowing into good ground. I need y'all to hold on to all the word that we've heard on tonight, the instruction, the information, and the inspiration. And sow a $23. You're sowing that $23 on tonight as a testimony. Because you are a testimony that what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. Sow a $23 offering of testimony on tonight. That's what you're sowing. This is, and when you type in the comments, this is my testimony. Type in the comments, this is my testimony. This is my testimony. If you're sowing that $23, I want you to type in the comments, this is my testimony. This is my a $23 testimony seed on tonight. That says, God, I thank you for blessing me. If I didn't have $23, I couldn't sow it. But since you've blessed me to be able to sow it, since I have it, my testimony on tonight is going to be that I'm going to sow. And when you sow, I want you to make that declaration. We've been making it all year long. 2023 is my many days. I see you, Sister Mary. God bless you. I see you, Sister Oradine. God bless you. 2023 is my many days. People have been getting blessed all year long in the area of finances, not just in the area of finances, but in businesses as well. Listen, saints, I didn't have time to tell y'all last week because we had so much church, but even in the midst of service, I got a text with a picture of a new car. And the brother testified and said, 2023 is my many days. God is blessing. You can't beat God giving. If you continue to sow, you continue to decrease, sow your tithe, sow your teruma, sow your benevolence. Continue to tithe and sow into the kingdom, your benevolence, your grace giving. You can't beat God giving. It's only $23. Since God has blessed you with it, sow it. If you don't have 23, do the best you can. Do the best you can. Do the best you can and watch God move on your behalf. Let me make these few announcements right quick as we get ready to get out of here. Next week, as I said, Minister Tara Keisha Hammond will be with us. May 23rd for TNT. This coming Sunday, Sister Paulette is going to be sharing this coming Sunday, processing loss and grief from pain to power to peace. That will be this coming Sunday. We look forward to seeing each and every one of you. My birthday's coming up. I want y'all to stay tuned for my birthday service, saints. My birthday service is coming up. TNT Live. We're going to be in person. Y'all know how, y'all been to TNT. Y'all seen TNT. Y'all watch it. Y'all know how we're going to do it. It's going to be Word Network, TBN style. It's going to be my time. I get to talk to the preacher. We're going to hear some great singing. And we're going to hear the word of the Lord. Reverend Pastor Reginald Sharp is oh my God, he's a preacher's preacher. And looking forward to hearing the word of the Lord from him. And hearing the music ministry of Fellowship Chicago. Y'all tag, y'all share. Anybody y'all know at Fellowship, tell them we looking forward to seeing and we want y'all to come out. 7 o'clock, the doors are open. Zeke Locke is going to be hosting. We're going to have music. We're going to have entertainment. We're going to have celebration. We're going to start off giving God the praise. Y'all make sure y'all come on out. Celebrate with me for my birthday. And then 4th Sunday is coming. 4th Sunday, our Road to 100 service. Don't forget 2 p.m. 4th Sunday. Our Road to 100 service. Y'all know who I am. I'm Bill Ellis. I love everybody. And as we say in church, if that be all, shall we stand? But stay tuned, stay connected with us. APC Morgan Park online, social media. APC Morgan Park on YouTube and our website, apcmorganpark.org. Look forward to seeing each and every one of you. See you Sunday. See you back here on TNT next Tuesday. We'll be back in church on next Sunday. And then the last Tuesday of this month,